I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would hand her own parents an eviction notice. But there I was standing in the doorway of the house I grew up in, watching the shocked expressions on my parents' faces as they read the legal papers in their trembling hands. The same parents who had sold this house behind my back and handed every penny to my older sister Jessica. The same ones who told me, "You're doing fine. Rachel, you don't need us anymore." They had no idea that I was the anonymous buyer. No idea that the sleek LLC on the documents was mine. No idea that the girl they had spent years overlooking had just outmaneuvered them in a way they never saw coming. I didn't do it for the house. Though that place holds every memory I cherish and every scar I carry, I did it because sometimes silence isn't strength. Sometimes the only way to make people hear you is to hit them where it hurts, right in the comfort they took for granted. People love to talk about family as if blood automatically means loyalty. But what happens when love turns into leverage? When giving becomes expected and sacrifice becomes invisible? This is the story of how my parents sold my childhood home, gave everything to the daughter who had never lifted a finger, and how I became the one holding the deed. If you think this is a revenge story, you're not wrong. But it's also a story about boundaries, truth, and the long road toward reclaiming not just a house but my worth. So, if you've ever been the forgotten child, the reliable one, the one they assumed would always be okay, this story is for you. Growing up, I used to believe that being the good one would earn me something in return: respect, appreciation, maybe even love that didn't have strings attached. I was wrong. My name is Rachel Parker, and I grew up in a modest but charming 2-story house on Willow Lane. White shutters, brick steps, a picket fence that always needed repainting. It wasn't grand, but it was home, or at least it felt that way until my sister Jessica turned it into a stage where only she got the spotlight. Jessica is 3 years older than me, from the moment I was old enough to recognize faces. Hers was the one everyone turned to with adoration. She had golden curls and a laugh that could make strangers smile in the grocery store. Teachers, neighbors, distant relatives, all of them praised her. But inside those walls, I learned a different truth in my family. Love came with hierarchy. It started small. Jessica would cry when we both wanted the same toy, and I'd be told to give it to her because you're the patient one, Rachel. She'd forget her homework, and I'd be told to help her finish it. She'd make a mess. I'd clean it up. I can't even count the times I heard my mother say, "Rachel, be a good sister." It was less a request and more an order, a mandate I never agreed to, but always followed. By the time we hit high school, the divide was undeniable. Jessica drifted through adolescence like it was a spa day, shopping, skipping class, dating older guys with motorcycles. Meanwhile, I was on the debate team, running track, tutoring kids after school, not because I had a burning passion for all of it, but because I was trying to earn something that always felt just out of reach their attention. And yet, no matter what I did, it was never enough. Jessica wrecked her first car at 17, texting while driving. My parents bought her a new one a month later. I got straight A's and passed up senior prom to study for a scholarship exam. My reward? A lukewarm "we're proud of you" honey over reheated spaghetti. That moment still lingers with me sitting at the dinner table. Books open beside my plate, while Jessica twirled her pasta and went on about a party she wasn't even grounded for. I looked up at my father, hoping for some acknowledgement. Instead, he was laughing at one of her stories, eyes crinkled with delight. That's when it hit me my accomplishments were wallpaper. Background, decorative, but forgettable. College was where I thought things would finally change. I got into Northwestern on a partial scholarship and worked 2 part-time jobs to cover the rest. I rented cheap apartments with peeling paint and heating that only worked when it felt like it. I skipped vacations, lived off rice and lentils, and stacked internships like Tetris blocks. Every time I'd call home, my mom would ask about Jessica before asking about me. Jessica, meanwhile, had dropped out of 2 colleges. She once went on a week-long cruise during finals and told my parents the stress was affecting her skin. They nodded solemnly and wired her money for a facial treatment plan. I can't make this stuff up. After college, I got a job in finance, and for the first time in my life, I could breathe. I worked hard, got promoted quickly, saved aggressively. I bought my own condo at 27, small but entirely mine. And I remember standing in the empty living room the day I got the keys, thinking, maybe now they'll see me. They didn't. In fact, my independence became just another excuse for them to turn away. Rachel doesn't need anything. They'd say, she's got it all figured out. What they meant was, she can survive without our love. So why bother Jessica? On the other hand, became a revolving door of crises, a failed jewelry business, a breakup that left her emotionally devastated and unable to work for 3 months, credit card debt, medical bills from mystery illnesses that never quite got diagnosed. Every single time, my parents bailed her out, quietly, without shame, and without ever once asking how I was holding up. It was during one of those emergencies that my mother first asked me for money. Just a short-term loan, she said. Your dad's hours got cut, and Jess is in a tight spot. I transferred $5,000 the same day. No questions asked. I told myself I was being a good daughter. That's what good daughters do. Right. But the requests kept coming. A little for the mortgage, a little for Dad's new prescription, a little for Jessica's rent because her roommate bailed. They never paid me back, and I never asked them to. I think part of me still believed that if I kept giving, eventually they'd see me. I didn't realize I was being used until I came home one weekend with groceries and walked in on Jessica laughing with my parents about a girl's trip to Napa she'd just booked, paid in full, by them. I stood in that kitchen, holding a sack of sweet potatoes, feeling like I'd just walked into someone else's life. I had bought the groceries because Mom said they were cutting back. Meanwhile, Jessica had just bought a new suitcase and a weekend escape. I didn't say anything then. I simply placed the bag on the counter, kissed my mother on the cheek, and drove back to my condo in silence. But the anger simmered beneath the surface like a fault line waiting to break. Everything shifted the day I drove past my childhood home and saw a real estate sign on the front lawn. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Surely they would have told me if they were selling. But when I called my mother, she acted surprised I cared. It's just a house. Honey, she said, we're ready to downsize. Jessica has some exciting business ideas, and we thought this would be a good time to support her. That was the moment something in me snapped. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the way they said it. As if the house that held all my memories, all my sacrifices, was a disposable tool for Jessica's next whim. As if I was an outsider looking in on my own life. And so, the plan began to form. Quiet at first, dangerous, but clear if they wanted to sell the house to help Jessica chase another fantasy. Fine. Let them. But they wouldn't be selling it to a stranger. They'd be selling it to me. And they wouldn't even know it. The day after I saw the for sale sign on the front lawn of my childhood home, I sat in my condo in stunned silence, the real estate agent's words still ringing in my ears. Excellent location, great bones, price to sell quickly. I should have laughed at the irony, but nothing about it felt funny. Instead, it felt surgical, like my parents had taken a scalpel and carved me out of our shared history clean, calculated and final. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at the ceiling, thoughts churning like a broken washing machine. Why hadn't they told me? Why now? And where was the money really going, Jessica? Of course, it was always Jessica. I didn't want to believe it until I scrolled through her social media and saw it with my own eyes. A carousel of posts business brain activated, manifesting my boutique empire, and the worst one, big things coming. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for believing in me. The caption was over a picture of her holding a floor plan sketch and sipping champagne. She hadn't even tried to hide it. That was the moment my stomach dropped. The sale of the house wasn't a family decision. It wasn't even a practical one. It was a transaction. And I wasn't just left out, I was the collateral damage. The next day, I called my mom under the pretense of checking in. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "I saw the house is listed. I wanted to hear it from you." There was a pause. "Oh, yes," she said lightly. "We meant to call you. It all happened very fast." That was a lie. Homes don't just go up for sale. You meet with agents. You sign paperwork. You stage the house. You make decisions. You tell your children unless, of course, you're trying to hide something from one of them. "And the money," I asked. "What's the plan once it sells?" Another pause. "Well, your father and I have been thinking about retirement, and Jessica, she's got some exciting opportunities lined up. We thought now would be a good time to support her." My chest tightened. "So you're giving her the proceeds. It's more like an investment," she said defensively. "We're helping her build something stable. She's been through so much. Rachel, you know that." I almost laughed at that. Jessica had been through so much. The girl had floated through life like a helium balloon, tethered to nothing and no one. I, on the other hand, had clawed my way through every obstacle they threw at me, and I was the one expected to understand. To be fine. That evening, I drove over unannounced. I told myself it was to get clarity. But the truth was, I wanted to see if they'd lie to my face. I walked into the kitchen to find my parents huddled around a stack of papers. My father looked up, startled. "Rachel, we weren't expecting you." "Yeah," I said coolly, setting a bag of groceries on the counter. "I figured as much." "So, selling the house, huh?" They both stiffened. "We were going to tell you tonight," my mother said quickly. "It's not a big deal. Just downsizing." "Not a big deal," I repeated, eyebrows raised. "It's the house I grew up in, Grandma's house, and you're selling it without even asking me." "You don't live here anymore," my father said, his tone suddenly sharp. "You have your own place. This is our decision." That stung more than I expected. I was silent for a moment, then asked, "And where's the money going?" They exchanged a glance. I'd come to recognize it over the years, the look that said, "Brace yourself, we're going to justify this." "Jessica's opening a boutique," my mom said. "She's really excited. She has a full business plan and everything." "Oh, so she Googled how to open a business. And now she's a CEO," I snapped. "She's never held a job longer than 3 months." "She's trying," my father said sternly. "She just needs support, something you've always had." The audacity of that sentence was breathtaking. "Support," I repeated. "You mean like the support I gave you, the money I've sent over the past few years to keep this house afloat? Or do you mean the emotional support I gave myself because you were too busy rescuing Jessica from her self-made disasters?" "Rachel, that's not fair," my mother began. "No," I cut in. "What's not fair is you selling this house and giving the money to Jessica without even talking to me. What's not fair is pretending that she's the one who needs help when I've been the one carrying this family in silence." I didn't wait for their reply. I walked out, got in my car, and drove away with white knuckles on the steering wheel. But as I sat at a red light 2 blocks away, the anger began to crystallize into something sharper, something with edges and weight. I had options. I knew the market. I knew the listing price was low, deliberately so. Probably to get a fast close and cash in before Jessica's next crisis. I also knew I had the means, the knowledge, and the network to make a move they'd never see coming. I could buy the house, anonymously, not to live in, not even to flip for profit, but to make a point, a statement, a declaration of self-worth they couldn't ignore this time. The idea felt dangerous, vindictive, maybe even cruel. But then I thought of all the times I'd gone without so Jessica could have more, all the times I'd swallowed my pain in exchange for quiet approval. And I thought maybe this isn't about revenge. Maybe this is about reclaiming what's mine. That night, I opened my laptop and made 2 phone calls. The first was to Erica Mitchell, a real estate attorney I'd worked with on multiple investment deals. She was brilliant, discreet, and as no-nonsense as they came. "Rachel," she said when she picked up, "what's going on? You never call this late unless it's serious." "It is," I replied. "I need to buy a house, but not just any house. My parents' house. And I need to do it without them knowing it's me." There was a pause. Well, this should be interesting. The second call was to Derek Williams, a colleague of mine in acquisitions who owed me a favor. Tall, confident, persuasive, he was the perfect frontman for what I was about to do. "Let me get this straight," Derek said. "You want me to pretend to buy your parents' house? For you?" "Exactly," I said. "But you're not pretending. You'll be the face. The LLC will be real. The offer will be real. And if all goes according to plan, the house will be mine before they even realize it." Derek let out a low whistle. "Rachel, this is some Game of Thrones level stuff." I smiled. For the first time in days, I felt in control. "Good," I said, "because it's time they learned who they've really been dealing with." Within 48 hours of that call to Erica and Derek, I had a fully outlined plan and a caffeine addiction on the rise. Step 1, create a limited liability company that couldn't be traced back to me. Erica connected me with a corporate attorney named Daniel Rosen, a quiet but brilliant man who specialized in privacy-focused business formations. "We'll register the LLC out of Delaware," he said, adjusting his glasses over Zoom. "That state offers maximum anonymity. Then we'll assign a third-party registered agent and use a business address in a different city. No paper trail, no connection to you." And just like that, Willow and Stone Ventures, LLC, was born. I chose the name because it meant something to me. Willow for the street I grew up on, Stone for the way I was learning to harden myself. No one would suspect the sentimental roots beneath the legal structure. Step 2, secure funding. Even though the listing price was undervalued, I didn't have enough in liquid assets to buy it outright. I needed a mortgage, and fast. Luckily, my credit score was stellar and my employment history clean. I called Morgan Ellis, a broker I'd worked with before, and laid out a version of the truth. "I'm helping a client acquire a residential property through a discrete entity. I'll be managing the portfolio on their behalf." Morgan didn't blink. "Send me the financials. I can have pre-approval in 48 hours. Money was never the issue. Timing was. Step 3, find the perfect buyer front. Derek Williams was a natural. Tall, charismatic, business casual to the bone. He could charm a room just by walking into it. More importantly, he'd never met my family and owed me for helping him close a brutal multi-million-dollar deal last year. When I told him what I needed, he grinned. "You want me to buy your parents' house for you?" Not gonna lie. "Rachel, that's the most chaotic thing I've ever agreed to." "It's not chaos," I said. "It's strategy." We rehearsed the cover story. Derek was an investor from Chicago looking to expand his residential portfolio in our neighborhood. I was his advisor, helping identify long-term rental opportunities. We scheduled a private showing for Saturday morning. My parents, unaware, were eager to accommodate a serious buyer. That morning, I dressed the part, structured blazer, crisp slacks, clipboard in hand. My heart pounded as we pulled into the driveway of the house I hadn't stepped foot in for weeks. The maple tree in the front yard was just starting to lose its leaves. It felt symbolic. My mother opened the door with her rehearsed real estate smile until she saw me. "Rachel," she said, blinking. "What are you doing here assisting a client?" I replied smoothly. "This is Derek Williams. He's interested in purchasing the property." She hesitated only a moment before ushering us in. "Of course. Welcome. Mr. Williams." The tour was excruciating. Every room told a story, my story, but it had been whitewashed. My childhood bedroom, once lavender with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, was now staged as a bland guest room. The kitchen, where I baked cookies with Grandma Rose, had been updated with cheap fixtures that made it look impersonal. The living room still smelled faintly of the cinnamon candles my mother always burned around the holidays. The smell made my throat tighten. Derek played his role flawlessly. He asked about plumbing, electrical, zoning, everything you'd expect from an investor. I scribbled notes, occasionally biting the inside of my cheek to stay composed. Jessica wasn't there, thank God. I didn't think I could stomach her smug face that morning. As we wrapped the tour, Derek turned to my parents and said, "The house has great bones. I think we're very interested. We'll be in touch soon." Back in the car, I finally exhaled. "You okay?" Derek asked, his voice gentle. "I'm fine," I lied. "Let's make the offer." We weren't the only ones bidding. Erica had pulled comps, and Morgan confirmed that the house had already received 2 offers, both at asking price. I had an edge, though I knew exactly how to play this game. No contingencies, I told Derek. Offer $10,000 over asking. All cash, 30-day close, bold. He said, "Necessary." I replied. By Monday morning, the offer was in. By Tuesday afternoon, we were under contract. My mother called me that evening, gushing. "You won't believe it. The house sold already." "That investor you brought, he made an incredible offer." "Wow," I said, feigning surprise. "That was quick. It's going to change everything for your sister." She continued. "She's already planning her boutique. We're going to help her lease a storefront next month." I nearly bit through my tongue. "Sounds exciting," I said flatly. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and silence. I reviewed every document through a magnifying lens. Erica handled the legal side with surgical precision, making sure my name never appeared on anything. At the final walkthrough, Derek returned alone. He sent me updates and texts. "Your dad keeps calling me a sharp young man." If only he knew. "Your mom said the house's energy felt lucky today." I'm trying not to laugh. "Your old bedroom still smells like vanilla air freshener." Creepy. Right. The day we closed, I sat in a cafe just blocks from the title company, pretending to sip tea while waiting for the message. At 11:47 my phone buzzed. "It's done. You own it?" I stared at the screen, numb. Then came a second text from Derek. "Congratulations. Homeowner. Again." It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like stepping off a cliff. That night, I walked through the empty house with a new set of keys in my hand. No one else knew I was there. The walls echoed differently now, emptier, colder, but underneath the silence, I could feel something shifting. This was no longer their house. It was mine, and soon, they would know it. I didn't move in right away. I needed time not just to breathe and let the adrenaline cool, but to plan my next move with precision. I didn't just want them to know I'd bought the house. I wanted them to feel what I had felt, the sting of exclusion, the sharp edge of betrayal, and the quiet disbelief that comes when someone you thought you understood does something completely unexpected. Poetic symmetry, Erica called it when I explained my plan. "That's one hell of a finale," she said, half impressed, half concerned. "Just be sure it's worth it." In the meantime, I began bringing in furniture piece by piece. I didn't need much, just enough to make the place livable again. I bought a new bed for the master bedroom, a sleek gray sectional for the living room, and a modest kitchen set. But the most important things were the boxes I'd kept in storage, old photo albums, my high school debate trophies, the lavender comforter from my childhood bed, and the framed recipe card Grandma Rose once wrote in perfect cursive. I placed her recipe above the kitchen sink like a blessing. The house was mine again. But it didn't feel complete, not until they knew. 2 weeks after the closing, I sent the invitation. I texted my mom I'm hosting a small housewarming. Just a few people. I'd love for you, Dad, and Jessica to come. Saturday at 7. I'll text the address. She replied within minutes. A new house? That's wonderful. We'll be there. Of course they didn't recognize the address. They'd never memorized the lot number of their own home. Too busy planning Jessica's future to remember the past they were leaving behind. Saturday arrived with the weight of a storm cloud. I wore black slacks, a silk blouse, and my confidence like armor. I set out a bottle of champagne, 3 glasses and 1 folder, the deed to the house, the closing documents, and one final surprise tucked inside an envelope marked Notice at 6:57 p.m. I saw their car pull up through the living room window. My heart raced not with fear, but with anticipation. This was no longer about revenge. This was about closure. I opened the door before they could knock. Jessica was the first to speak. Wait, this looks like... Come in, I said, stepping aside. They walked through the threshold hesitantly, like they were stepping into a dream they didn't fully understand. My mother blinked rapidly as she looked around at the familiar walls painted a fresh shade of cream. My father furrowed his brow. This looks exactly like our old house I offered? That's because it is. Jessica crossed her arms. What is this? Rachel. I smiled. Have a seat. They sat on the newly upholstered couch. My couch. I walked to the credenza and poured 3 glasses of champagne, placing one in front of each of them. They stared at them like they were explosives. My father cleared his throat. We sold this place. It's not ours anymore. I know, I said, picking up the folder and walking to stand before them. You sold it, for far less than market value, I might add, to a company named Willow and Stone Ventures. LLC? Jessica scoffed. So, I said, placing the folder on the coffee table and flipping it open. I own Willow and Stone. Silence. Then my father laughed short, incredulous. No way. My mother picked up the deed with shaking fingers. Is this real? It's all real, I said calmly. I bought this house, through my company, with my money, the same money you said I didn't need because I was doing fine. Jessica's face twisted into something between outrage and disbelief. You tricked us? No, I replied. You excluded me. You dismissed me. I simply did what you taught me to do my whole life, figure it out on my own. My father's voice was hard. This is sick. Rachel, you orchestrated all of this just to humiliate us. I raised my eyebrows. Do you feel humiliated? That must be hard. Imagine how I felt. Finding out the house I loved was being sold without my knowledge so you could fund Jessica's latest fantasy. Jessica stood up. Don't act like you're some kind of hero. You don't even live here. I do now, I said. And as the legal owner, I'm within my rights to decide who is and isn't welcome here. My mother looked at me with wet eyes. You've made your point. Can we just go? Not quite yet. I slid the envelope across the table. This is a formal notice. You have 30 days to vacate the apartment you're currently living in. My father exploded. What? That's not legal. You can't evict us. We don't live here anymore. I know, I said. But in the contract you signed with Willow and Stone, there's a clause prohibiting the previous sellers from establishing residence within 1 mile of the property without written consent. Your current rental, it's half a mile away. That was a bluff. Of course. There was no such clause, but they didn't know that, and I wasn't above letting them squirm. If you challenge it, I added, you'll be drawing attention to a contract you didn't even bother to read, might not reflect well in court. Jessica stormed toward the door. This is insane. I'm not listening to this. I looked at her one last time. You burned through $300,000 in a month. You lied about a business plan. You took everything they had and they let you, but not anymore. She slammed the door on her way out. My father stood next. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said. Just equal. They left, silent and shaken. As the sound of their car faded into the night, I sat on the couch and finally drank the champagne. It was a hollow kind of victory, but it was mine. I hadn't just taken back the house. I'd taken back my place in the story. I thought I would feel triumphant. As I sat in my reclaimed living room, sipping champagne in the silence they'd left behind, I waited for the feeling of satisfaction to rush in, the closure, the justice, the power. But what came instead was quiet. Not peaceful, quiet, anxious quiet. Like the moment after a slammed door when you realize nothing will ever be the same. The next morning, the fallout began. It started with a voicemail from Aunt Margaret, my mother's older sister. Her voice was shaking with outrage. Rachel, I don't know what got into you, but evicting your own parents... Have you lost your mind? Call me back and explain yourself. I deleted it. Then came the texts. My phone lit up with messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were passive-aggressive. Heard you bought the house. Bold move. Others were flat-out attacks. What you did was disgusting. Family is family. Apparently, my parents had wasted no time spinning the story. I imagined the version they told about their ungrateful daughter who tricked them, humiliated them, and forced them out of the neighborhood. I could almost hear my mother's trembling voice describing the coldness of my reveal, the cruelty of my timing. Of course, they left out the part where they sold my childhood home without a word, gave every cent to Jessica, and told me I was on my own. Funny how memories work when shame is involved. I ignored most of the messages, but one stuck with me. It was from Aunt Valerie, my mother's youngest sister, and the only person in our extended family who had ever pulled me aside to ask how I was really doing. Is it true, her text read? Did you really buy the house behind their backs and evict them? I called her that night. Yes and no. I told her. I bought the house, through an LLC, but I didn't evict them from it. They were already gone. I just made them feel what it's like to be shut out. Aunt Valerie was quiet for a long moment. That makes more sense than what your mom told me. She said you ambushed them. I didn't ambush anyone. I told them the truth. Finally, her voice softened. They were wrong. Rachel, I always saw how differently they treated you and Jessica, but this might burn the bridge for good. I hesitated. Maybe the bridge needed to burn, but the truth is I didn't know. Jessica, of course, didn't stay quiet. She took to social media with a vengeance. A dramatic Instagram post went up the next day, a filtered selfie of her wiping fake tears away, captioned, "Some people can't stand to see others rise, so they do everything they can to tear you down. Betrayal hurts most when it comes from family. Hashtag fake blood. Hashtag real pain. Hashtag sister for sale." The comments were full of pity from her friends and followers. OMG, what happened? She sounds toxic. You deserve better. Queen. I didn't respond. I didn't even read them all. It wasn't worth it. But it still stung. That evening I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling of my old bedroom, the one I had spent weeks restoring. The soft lavender walls, the neatly aligned books on the shelf, the trophies dusted and gleaming. A room frozen in time. And yet, something inside me had shifted. The anger that had driven me was still there, but now it was tangled with something heavier, doubt. Had I gone too far, I thought of my father's red face, my mother's trembling hands. I thought of Jessica's voice, shrill with disbelief. I thought of Grandma Rose, who once said, "You can't control how people treat you, only how you respond." Was this the response she would have wanted Monday morning? I showed up at work like nothing had happened. But people noticed. Derek pulled me into my office before our morning meeting. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, too quickly. "Why wouldn't I be?" He gave me a look. "Because you just flipped your entire family dynamic upside down and probably set off a generational feud." I sighed, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes. "I don't know how I'm supposed to feel." He hesitated. "Have you thought about talking to someone?" I knew what he meant. "A therapist?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah. I think I need to." Later that week, I booked an appointment with a family trauma therapist named Dr. Miranda Cohen. In our first session, I laid it all out: years of invisibility, of being the strong one, of sacrifices unnoticed and love conditional. Dr. Cohen listened without interrupting, then said gently, "You've been carrying this story your whole life. No wonder you needed to rewrite the ending." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. I hadn't just bought the house, I had reclaimed the narrative. But the story didn't end with a deed and an eviction notice. It went deeper than that. Because now that I'd made my point, I had to decide what came next. Forgiveness, distance, nothing at all. The next week, my mother texted me, "Can we talk?" Just the two of us. My first instinct was to ignore it. But therapy had taught me that closure doesn't always come from slamming doors. It sometimes comes from opening them, even if only a crack. We met at a neutral coffee shop near downtown. She looked tired, smaller somehow. Her usual polished exterior had faded. "I didn't come here to fight," she said softly, her fingers wrapped around a steaming cup. "Then don't," I replied. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said something I never thought I'd hear. "I think we took you for granted. We thought because you were so capable, we didn't have to worry about you." I said nothing. "Not yet. Your father, he's still angry, but I wanted to understand why you did it this way. Why not just tell us you wanted to buy the house?" I met her eyes. "Would you have sold it to me, or would you have given the money to Jessica anyway?" She didn't answer, but her silence told me everything I needed to know. I was trying to protect something. I continued, "Not just the house, but myself." She nodded slowly. "I see that now. I just hope it's not too late to repair what we broke." I didn't give her an answer. Not yet. But I allowed her to walk with me to the parking lot. That, in itself, was progress. That night, I stood in the living room of my house, the house I had fought for, grieved for, and reclaimed. I didn't feel victorious, but I felt seen. And that was more than I ever thought I'd get. After the coffee shop meeting with my mother, I expected a wave of relief, closure, maybe a lightness in my chest, some whisper of peace. It didn't come. Instead, I felt like I had opened a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. The image of her sitting across from me, smaller, softer, less polished, haunted me. She hadn't come to manipulate or defend. She had come with her hands metaphorically open, her voice uncertain. And that made everything more complicated, because I wasn't just angry anymore. I was sad. Sad for the version of myself that had gone decades without being truly seen. Sad for the version of my mother who had let her fears of Jessica's fragility override her fairness. Sad for the version of my family that might have existed if different choices had been made. In my next therapy session, I told Dr. Cohen everything, the house, the reveal, the aftermath, the coffee shop. She listened as always, no judgment, no interruptions. Then she asked the question I didn't expect. "What are you protecting now?" "Rachel." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" You protected yourself when you bought the house. You took your power back. You protected your boundaries with that confrontation. But what are you still guarding? What haven't you let yourself feel? The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Then I said it. I think I'm afraid that if I forgive them, it means everything they did was okay. She nodded slowly. Forgiveness isn't agreement. It's choosing to stop carrying something heavy. It's a process, not a pardon. That night, I cried. For the first time in months. Maybe years. Not angry tears. Not revenge-fueled or pride-hardened tears. Just sadness. Raw. Overdue sadness. The days that followed were quiet. Jessica's social media tirade eventually lost steam. Either her followers got bored, or she realized no one was offering money to go with their sympathy. She still hadn't reached out to me directly, and I hadn't expected her to. But my mother did. One day, she texted, "Your dad had another doctor appointment." It wasn't great. I didn't respond right away. I stared at the message for hours. I thought of my father's red face at the housewarming, his pride, his denial, his final words. "You think this makes you better than us." But I also thought of him teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway when I was 6. Of the time he stayed up late to help me finish my 4th-grade science project when I cried because my glue gun broke. He wasn't always cruel. He was just blind. To the ways favoritism had chipped away at me. To the ways he'd enabled Jessica's chaos out of love and fear and maybe guilt. I texted back, "Let me know if he wants company." She replied almost immediately. He won't admit it, but yes, I visited him at their rental apartment the following weekend. The place was even smaller than I remembered. A 2-bedroom unit in a mid-rise building just outside the city. Thin walls, beige everything. A couch that squeaked when I sat down. He looked older, not just in age but in posture, like life had taken something out of him and hadn't given it back. "Rachel?" he said gruffly, nodding toward the chair. "Didn't expect you. Mom said your test results weren't great." He grunted. "Blood pressure's high. Cholesterol too. Doctor wants to talk about stress." I almost smiled. That's a shock. He looked at me, then really looked at me. "You didn't have to come?" "I know." I said, "But I did." A long pause settled between us. Then he said quietly, "You played us." I nodded. I did. Why, he asked, not angry, just bewildered, because I was tired of being invisible. He exhaled, leaned back, stared at the ceiling. "We didn't mean to make you feel that way, but you did," I replied. "For years, you made everything about Jessica, her needs, her wants, her failures, and I was the one who just had to cope. You called me strong, but really, you just used it as an excuse to leave me out." He didn't argue. He didn't even look up. After a minute, he said, "We were scared. About her. Still are." I nodded. "I know. But you forgot to be parents to me, too. We didn't solve everything in that conversation, but we named things, acknowledged them. And sometimes, that's where healing begins, not in fixing, but in witnessing. In the months that followed, we rebuilt. Not all at once, not easily, but piece by piece. My mother started calling once a week. Sometimes she asked about work. Sometimes she asked about therapy. Once, she even asked how the house was coming along. I told her about the new hardwood floors, the garden I'd started out back. The lavender bedroom now turned into a home office, still painted in soft tones of childhood, but now lined with new purpose. She sounded proud. "I'm glad you have it," she said one day. "I really am." Even after everything, she hesitated. "Because of everything, you deserve something that's yours." Jessica remained distant. After burning through the house money, she moved in with a friend and got a part-time retail job, ironically. At a boutique, My mother told me in one of our calls that Jessica hated it, that she was struggling. She's different now. Mom said, quieter, humbled. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. One day, Jessica showed up at my doorstep. I almost didn't recognize her. No fake lashes, no polished heels, no designer purse. Just jeans, a tired hoodie, and eyes that looked like they'd seen reality for the first time. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I'm not even here to ask for money." "Then why are you here?" I asked, hand on the doorknob. "To say, I don't know, sorry. I guess I didn't open the door fully, but I didn't close it either. You lied," I said. "You manipulated them. You used me, and when you got caught, you made me the villain." She looked down. "I know. I don't trust you," I continued. "I don't know if I ever will. I get it," she whispered. Then she looked up and met my eyes. "But I'm trying. I swear. I'm working. I'm paying my own bills. And I've never done that before." I studied her. For the first time. She looked less like a spoiled child and more like a person growing out of their worst habits. "I'm not ready to be sisters again," I said. "I'm not asking for that," she replied. "Just maybe someday we could start from scratch." I gave her a nod. "That's all I've got," she said, backing away. "See you around." Rachel, 6 months after buying the house, I threw my first real dinner party. Just a few close friends, some colleagues, and surprisingly my parents. I didn't invite Jessica. Not yet. That evening, as the smell of baked lasagna filled the air, and the kitchen glowed with warm light, my mother stood beside me at the sink. "You made this place beautiful," she said, drying a dish. "It still feels like home, but it's yours now." I looked at her. "Yes," I said. "It is." That night, after everyone had gone, I stood in the hallway and touched the wall where my height had once been measured in faded pencil marks. I didn't erase them. I never would. They were part of the story, even the painful parts, because this wasn't just a story of revenge. It was a story of reclamation, of remembering who I was before they forgot, of becoming who I was meant to be. Even if I had to do it alone, I used to think forgiveness was a door you walked through once wide open, dramatic, final. Now I know it's a hallway. Long, narrow, with flickering lights. Some days, you take a step forward. Others, you sit down and wonder if it's worth continuing. 6 months had passed since I bought the house, since I dropped the bombshell at the housewarming, served my parents the truth, and watched the fragile structure of our family collapse. Now, I was rebuilding not just the house, but myself. And this time, I was building with boundaries. My weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Cohen had become a lifeline, not because I needed fixing, but because I needed space, a space where I could unravel the tight knots of old roles and rewrite the internal scripts I had lived with for too long. "You were trained to be the fixer," she told me once. "To be strong so others didn't have to be. But strength without boundaries isn't noble. It's self-abandonment." Those words stayed with me. So I made rules, clear ones. I would talk to my parents, but I wouldn't be their therapist. I would help if there was a real emergency, but I wouldn't bankroll anyone's poor planning. I would listen, but I would not absorb, and I stuck to them. My relationship with my mom evolved the quickest. She had begun to truly listen in a way she never had before. Our conversations weren't always easy, but they were honest. Sometimes she'd make a comment about how Jessica just doesn't have your discipline, or we didn't know how to support both of you. But when she did, I'd say simply, "That may be true, but it still hurt." And she wouldn't deflect anymore. She'd nod, sometimes cry, and we'd keep going. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. My father took longer. He was slower to talk, slower to change, but I saw it in his gestures. The way he didn't flinch anymore when I mentioned my feelings. The way he didn't defend Jessica by default. He even showed up one day to help me with the garden, silently digging alongside me for an hour before saying, "You did right. You know, buying the house." I looked at him, startled. "You think so?" He wiped sweat from his brow. "You took care of what we couldn't." "You did what was smart, even if it stung. It wasn't an apology, but it was something." As for Jessica, that was its own terrain. After our brief doorstep conversation, we hadn't spoken much. I didn't block her. I didn't reach out. We existed in parallel lines, and I was okay with that. Then one afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a note. "Rachel, I'm still figuring things out. Still failing sometimes. But I'm working. For real this time. I hope one day you'll let me show you. Jess, no dramatic apology. No manipulation. Just a crack in the wall." I didn't reply. Not yet. But I kept the note. It sat in my desk drawer. Beside Grandma Rose's recipe card and my old debate medals. A reminder that people can change, but they don't always deserve immediate access just because they're trying. Forgiveness isn't fast. And it isn't free. Meanwhile, the house had become more than a home. It had become my anchor. I hosted quiet dinners, grew tomatoes in the backyard, painted the upstairs hallway a pale sage green. I left some of the old elements untouched, like the scuffed door frame with our childhood height marks. I didn't need to erase the past to build something new. My friends came over more often. Derek, who had been the face of my plan, became one of my closest confidants. Sometimes we sat on the porch with wine and said nothing at all, just shared silence and the occasional knowing look. "This place suits you," he told me once. "It's strange," I replied, "how something can hold so much pain and still feel like peace." He nodded. "Maybe because you earned it, every corner." He was right. The house wasn't just a symbol of revenge anymore. It was a living monument to growth, to hard boundaries and soft healing, to choosing yourself without losing your compassion. Eventually, I allowed Jessica to come over once. It was a test, and we both knew it. She arrived on time, dressed simply, carrying a small basket of muffins. Not homemade store-bought, but the gesture wasn't lost on me. We sat outside under the maple tree, the same one our dad planted decades ago, back when life still felt symmetrical and simple. Jessica fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. "I know I don't deserve to be here," she said, "but I want to say thank you for not slamming the door in my face again." I sipped my tea. I didn't open it fully either. She gave a small laugh. "Fair." Then she looked at me, really looked. "You always seemed untouchable to me, like nothing got to you. But I see now. You were just surviving. It took everything in me not to cry." We talked for half an hour. I kept it light, no deep dives. But when she left, I felt less guarded, still wary, still cautious, but maybe, just maybe, willing to leave a window cracked open. A year after I'd bought the house, I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by everything I had chosen for myself. The space was different now. Lighter, warmer. Not because the furniture had changed, but because I had. I wasn't the girl who longed for validation anymore. I wasn't the daughter hoping for a scrap of attention. I was Rachel Parker, homeowner, strategist, survivor, and slowly, a woman learning to live without armor. I had learned that revenge might taste sweet in the moment, but it doesn't fill you. That boundaries don't mean you don't love someone, they mean you love yourself enough not to be broken again. That healing isn't something someone else gives you. It's what you give yourself when you finally stop waiting for the apology that may never come. 1 year to the day after I saw the for sale sign in my parents' yard, I hosted a small dinner. Not for revenge, not for show, for closure. The guest list was short: my parents, my Aunt Valerie, Derek, and a few close friends who had stood beside me through every twist in this absurd, painful, liberating story. It wasn't a celebration. It was a marker. A line in the sand between who I had been and who I was becoming. My parents arrived first. My mother brought a lemon meringue pie, Grandma Rose's recipe. My father brought a bottle of wine and a hesitant smile. Neither of them mentioned the past. Neither of them brought up the eviction notice, the confrontation, or even Jessica. And that, for once, felt like progress. We ate on the patio beneath string lights I'd hung myself. The garden was in full bloom, tomatoes bursting red on their vines, basil tall and fragrant, mint creeping toward the steps. It was a different kind of life than I'd ever imagined for myself, one rooted in choice, not duty. After dinner, while everyone else lingered in conversation, I walked my father through the house. He ran his hand along the new banister, nodding quietly. When we reached the hallway upstairs, he paused at the pencil marks on the doorframe, our height recordings from childhood. "You kept these," he said. I nodded. "They're part of the story." He didn't say much more, but as we stood there, shoulder to shoulder, I could feel the tension between us softening, not gone, not healed entirely, but thawed enough to begin something new. Later, my mom stood beside me at the sink, drying dishes as I washed. We worked in silence. Then she said, "I'm proud of what you built here. I built it from what was left." I replied. She looked down, then back at me. "Sometimes, the pieces are all we leave our children. I'm sorry it took so long to realize that you deserved more." I didn't forgive her on the spot. I didn't cry or offer a hug. I simply said, "Thank you for saying that," because it was enough for now. Jessica wasn't invited to the dinner. Not because I hated her, but because I wasn't ready. She understood. Or at least, she didn't push. We had exchanged a few messages. Civil, polite, cautious. Her job at the boutique was still intact. She was living with a roommate who worked nights. And for the first time in years, she seemed to be figuring things out without a safety net. I didn't trust her, not yet, but I no longer wished her failure. And that was its own kind of freedom. Forgiveness, I was learning, is not an eraser. It's not forgetting or pretending. It's remembering with less pain. A few weeks after the dinner, I received a package in the mail. No note, just a small hardcover photo album. Inside were pictures I had never seen before me as a baby, as a toddler, as a giggling kindergartner wrapped in my father's arms, my mother holding me as I reached for candles on a birthday cake, me and Grandma Rose baking cookies, both of us dusted in flour, moments before Jessica, moments where I had been the center of their world, moments I hadn't realized still existed. I sat on the floor, flipping through the pages, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. Not because I longed for what was, but because I finally had proof that it had been real. They had loved me once. They just forgot how, and I had spent years trying to remind them, until I finally realized I didn't have to. Some people heal by walking away, others heal by staying and changing the terms. I chose the latter, not because I owed them anything, not because I believed in some romanticized version of family, but because I wanted to see what kind of life I could build with boundaries, with honesty, and with the quiet confidence that I am not less valuable just because I don't demand attention the way others do. I stopped performing for their approval. I stopped trying to be the exception to their neglect. I started being the rule in my own life. And that made all the difference. Today, the house feels like mine in a way it never did before. The walls hold my laughter, my voice, my choices. The guest room is painted a soft gray now, and sometimes my mom stays there on weekends when she visits. She doesn't assume anymore. She asks, and I get to say yes or no. The living room shelves display both old and new family photos. Books I love. Mementos from places I've gone alone. There's even a photo of Jessica and me as children grinning in matching overalls because some memories deserve to stay, even if the people in them changed. I've learned how to set the table for peace without inviting back the chaos. And maybe that's the most powerful thing of all. To anyone reading this, or listening, or watching if you've ever been the overlooked child, the dependable one, the strong one they probably told you that you didn't need anything. They were wrong. You needed to be seen. You needed love without performance. You needed fairness, not favoritism dressed up as love. And if you never got that, you still get to choose how your story ends. You don't have to burn down the house to reclaim your place. But if you do, just make sure you build something better from the ashes. I did. And it changed everything. This was my house. This is my story. And finally, this is my peace.